Welcome to my podcast, Scientist Free from Religion. This podcast has as proposal, as main idea to talk about a scientific topic, but also talk about religion. Different from the common assumption in which science and religion should be separated, here on this podcast we recognize formally that science and religion are not disconnected. Sadly, religion can be a very big threat to science. So on this podcast, the proposal is to talk about it freely, so without fear, without the illusion that they are separate topics. So we are going to cover a possible topic. Most of them will be focused on the connection between religion and science, especially to defend science. That's our goal. Our goal here is to defend science from religion and to help to make science, to spread scientific thinking, especially to defend it against religion.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a question Christopher Hitchens famously posed, and he didn't exactly whisper it, did he? How come religion and fascism always tie the knots?
It really does cut right to the bone, that question. And Hitchens, even years after his death, his voice just remains so sharp, so relevant for understanding power.
Absolutely. So our goal here is to really unpack his arguments using the sources. We want to explore those deep connections he saw, structural, historical, philosophical, between organized religion and fascism.
And crucially, why these alliances seem to keep popping up, even today. We'll look at examples, old and new, and try to understand the impact, on people's freedom and world events.
Yeah, think of this as getting a clearer view on some pretty powerful forces shaping societies. It's about critical thinking, really, giving you the tools to navigate what's going on.
Okay, so where do we start? Hitchens' core idea.
Let's jump right in there. He had that incredibly vivid, almost, shocking description of religion itself. He called it a celestial North Korea.
Yet that's not just rhetoric, is it? He meant it structurally. He saw specific parallels.
What were those parallels exactly?
Well, he laid out four main ones. Both systems, he argued, demand submission over autonomy. They prioritize revelation, divine truth over rational inquiry.
Okay.
They lean on ritual instead of genuine questioning or dialogue. And, maybe most chillingly, they favor punishment over discussion when dealing with dissent.
Submission, revelation, ritual, punishment. That's quite the list.
It is. And he argued this setup basically casts the believer or the citizen in the fascist state as a subject, someone created sick and commanded to be well.
Which sounds eerily like state propaganda.
Exactly. That whole "you are broken, the system will fix you."
Yeah.
But the catch is always only if you obey. It reduces the individual, doesn't it? From a thinking citizen to just a subject.
That really clarifies the mechanism he saw, and historically he wasn't afraid to connect the dots quite controversially. He made that bold claim. Fascism is just another name for the extreme right-wing forces of the Roman Catholic Church.
He definitely didn't shy away. And he pointed to specific examples, arguing the church didn't just, look the other way, but actively conspired with fascist regimes.
Where specifically?
He listed Portugal under Salazar, Franco's Spain, the Ustaše in Croatia, that was the WWII-era fascist movement there, and, of course, Mussolini's Italy. He even included Poland's clerical right in that picture.
And these weren't just backroom nods, right? There were formal agreements.
Oh, absolutely. Concrete deals. Take the Lateran Treaty in 1929. That was between Mussolini and the Vatican. It basically gave the church huge influence, even sovereignty with Vatican City, and in return, Mussolini got crucial political backing.
And then the Nazi Concordat.
Yes, the Reichskonkordat of 1933. This was actually Hitler's first major international agreement. Think about that.
Wow.
It granted the church control over Catholic education in Germany. But the price was the dissolution of the Catholic Center Party, a major political force that could have opposed the Nazis.
Nowhere.
Quid pro quo.
So a clear trade influence for political silence or even support.
Precisely. And Hitchens also pointed out how this played out on an individual level. He mentioned the writer Evelyn Waugh, who supported fascist movements in Spain, Croatia, and even Mussolini's invasion of Abyssinia.
Why?
According to Hitchens, it was because these movements had the Vatican's backing. It shows how deep that connection between faith and political allegiance could run, even for intellectuals.
So we've seen the historical pattern he identified, but Hitchens argued this wasn't just history, right? He saw it continuing.
He absolutely insisted it wasn't over. He said the fusion wasn't retreating, it was evolving. Fast forward to our time, And you see examples that seem to fit his model perfectly. Think about Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church.
Right. It seems Putin deliberately cultivated this nationalist religious identity. The church isn't just there for prayers, it's presented as the guardian of traditional values, almost the ideological arm of his expansionism.
And the head of the church, Patriarch Kirill, has explicitly framed the invasion of Ukraine as a metaphysical battle. Not just politics, but a holy war against Western decadence.
That's chilling language.
And it translates into action. You have priests blessing missiles, dissenters being labeled blasphemers, LGBTQ plus people demonized as heretics. The church and the state effectively speaking with one voice to, well, sanctify violence for holy Russia. It feels very much like what Hitchens described.
And he saw similar dynamics elsewhere, even in democracies. You mentioned Brazil.
Jair Bolsonaro, yeah.
Yeah.
His rise was massively boosted by evangelical churches. His rallies often felt like religious revivals. Policies were framed almost like scripture.
Didn't he call himself Messiah at one point?
He did, and he consistently used faith as a tool against science, against LGBTQ plus rights, against indigenous groups. He put evangelicals into key government posts, education, culture, courts, all while chanting God above all. It's a very clear example of that fusion.
And then there's the U.S. context with Donald Trump.
A different flavor, perhaps, but Hitchens would likely point to the intense support from white evangelicals, many of whom viewed him almost as a divine instrument, despite his personal conduct.
He delivered for them politically, didn't he? Anti-abortion judges, pushes for prayer in schools, attacks on trans rights.
Exactly. Plus, the constant signaling to Christian nationalists. Remember him holding up the Bible outside the church? Or claiming to be the chosen one? For Hitchens, these weren't just quirks. They were signs of that evolving fusion.
So he wasn't just looking back, he was warning about the present and future, pointing to places like Orban's Hungary or Modi's India too.
Yes, he saw it as a global, ongoing trend. The forms change, but the underlying dynamic persists.
Okay, so we see the history, we see the modern examples, but why? Why do these knots keep tying? What's the mutual benefit here?
It's symbiotic, really. Religion offers fascism a kind of metaphysical legitimacy. It takes raw coercion and dresses it up as destiny, as sacred duty.
Makes it easier to swallow, perhaps, gives it a higher purpose than just power.
Exactly. And in return, fascism gives religion state power. It can enforce doctrine, suppress rival beliefs, embed religious norms into law, sometimes, quite literally, at gunpoint.
So they empower each other. What core traits do they share that makes this alliance work so well?
Hitchens pointed to several things. Both fundamentally hate ambiguity. They want clear answers, clear enemies. Both demand conformity and suppress dissent.
Right.
Both exalt their own group, the tribe, the nation, the faithful, and foster fear or hatred of the outsider, the unbeliever, the other. And both promise some kind of perfect future, a utopia, whether it's heaven or a 1,000-year Reich. But it always requires total submission first.
And that brings us back to the individual.
Yes. The core issue for Hitchens was that both systems treat the individual not as a citizen with inherent rights and reason, but as a subject, there to obey and believe.
This leads into his wider and frankly much sharper critique, his famous line that religion poisons everything. He started right at the origins, didn't he? Calling religion man-made, born from fear and ignorance.
He really did. He described it as emerging from the bawling and fearful infancy of our species, a time of just abysmal ignorance. He'd point to the founders, Aquinas, Maimonides, Augustine, Luther, Muhammad, and highlight beliefs they held that we now know are just plain wrong.
Like what?
Well, believing the sun went around the earth, or in astrology, or magical beings like jinns, his point was provocative. The average schoolchild today knows more about the natural world than these revered figures did.
And he argued this foundational ignorance led to a hostility towards actual knowledge.
Yes, a hostility to free inquiry. He'd cite the persecution of early atomists, or Galileo, as prime examples. A general tendency, he felt, to distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason.
From there, he moved to what he saw as deep moral problems within the holy texts themselves. The Old Testament, for example.
He was unsparing there. He highlighted passages that seemed to him to provide divine warrants for, well, horrific things. Human trafficking, ethnic cleansing, slavery, bride price, massacres. He'd cite commands attributed to Moses about killing conquered male children, but keeping virgin girls.
That's strong stuff.
And he'd add that modern archaeology, particularly from Israeli scholars, finds little to no evidence for core narratives like the Exodus, the wandering in the desert, or the conquest of Canaan, suggesting they were later constructs.
Did you find similar issues in the New Testament?
He did. He pointed to what he called illiteracies and contradictions, things like apparent inconsistencies in the virgin birth story, Mary seeming not to remember angelic visits, Jesus being rude to her. He also noted that famous stories, like the woman taken in adultery, are now known by scholars to be much later additions, not original text.
Interesting.
And he emphasized that the whole concept of eternal hellfire, that's pretty much unique to the New Testament's portrayal of Jesus' teachings. It wasn't really there in the Old Testament.
And it wasn't just Christianity or Judaism he critiqued on these grounds.
No, not at all. He mentioned how, during World War II, some Japanese Buddhists actually supported the Axis powers, embracing a philosophy of killing one so that many may live. They even helped recruit kamikaze pilots by telling them the emperor was a divine figure, a golden wheel-turning sacred king. Buddhist fascism, essentially.
So a perversion of principles in the service of power.
Which brings us to one of his most damning points.
Yeah.
What he termed the conscription of the unprotected child. He saw this as a unique failing of religion.
Example.
Denying kids urgent medical care based on faith, like with Christian Science or Jehovah's Witnesses, the massive systemic child sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church, Iran lowering the age of consent to 9, and groups like Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda committing atrocities against children while claiming to impose the Ten Commandments.
It's a truly devastating list.
He also touched on apocalypticism, the tendency in many religions to almost look forward to the end of the world. St. Paul, the Book of Revelation, even modern bestsellers like the Left Behind series. Hitchens saw this as a kind of repressed desire to see everything smashed up.
And what about things like miracles or religious consolation?
He was deeply skeptical. He'd point to supposed miracles like one attributed to Mother Teresa for her sainthood that turned out to have perfectly ordinary medical explanations. And he engaged with Marx's opium of the people idea.
How so?
He clarified that Marx saw religion as both an expression of real suffering and a protest against it. It was the opium, offering solace. But Marx's conclusion, which Hitchens shared, was that abolishing religion as an illusory happiness was necessary for people to achieve real happiness.
So the comfort it offers prevents finding genuine solutions.
That was the argument.
Yeah.
And finally, he consistently criticized what he saw as the failure of religious leaders, from the Vatican to Saudi Arabia to Iran, to unequivocally condemn atrocities committed in the name of their faith, a sort of damning silence or equivocation.
Given this intense critique, what did Hitchens propose as the way forward, the alternative?
He championed reason, secularism, and the legacy of the Enlightenment. He looked to figures like James Madison and Thomas Jefferson in the U.S., who fought to establish separation of church and state and ban religious tests for office.
Building walls against religious intrusion into government.
Exactly. And he drew inspiration from philosophers. Spinoza, who argued for that separation and tried to create a more rational concept of God. David Hume, whose critiques of religion anticipated Darwin. Kant, who argued morality comes from human reason, not divine command, his categorical imperative.
Even Einstein.
Yes, Einstein spoke of believing in Spinoza's God, a God revealed in the harmony of nature, not a personal God who intervenes. Einstein saw ethics as a purely human concern.
So the core message was that you don't need faith to be good.
Absolutely. Hitchens insisted an ethical life is perfectly possible without religion. He'd mention atheists known for their kindness and integrity, like the philosopher A.J. Ayer or the orator Robert Ingersoll. He even used an example of a Muslim cab driver returning lost money out of Islamic duty, acknowledging ethical behavior within faith, but arguing it wasn't dependent on it. The key was, ethics are human.
But what about the counter-argument that secular regimes, like Stalin's or Mao's, were also horrific? Didn't they prove atheism could be just as bad?
Hitchens tackled that head-on. First, he pointed out that for most of history, tyranny was religious. Kings were gods or heads of churches. The idea of a secular state is relatively new.
Okay.
Second, he argued that regimes like Stalinism weren't really negating religion, they were trying to replace it. They created secular cults with infallible leaders, scripture-like texts, heresy hunts, show trials, even relics like Lenin's preserved body. It mimicked religious structures. The book The God That Failed explored this well.
So they were like twisted secular religions themselves.
In a way, yes. So for Hitchens, the answer isn't trading religious tyranny for secular tyranny. The answer is defending secular pluralism. The right to believe, but crucially, the right not to believe and the right not to be forced.
And he saw this defense as vital.
Absolutely essential. An urgent and inescapable responsibility, he called it. A matter of survival, even. He saw history as this constant struggle.
How did he put it?
Like A tiny step forward by scholarship and reason, a huge menacing lurch forward by the forces of barbarism. Those forces being the people who know they're right and want to impose a reign of piety and iron. It's an ongoing bout.
A constant need for vigilance, then.
That's the takeaway. The fight for reason, for individual liberty against the lure of absolute certainty that fight is never really won.
Well, that certainly gives us a lot to think about. Hitchens presents this powerful, sometimes uncomfortable argument about the shared DNA of religion and fascism seen in history and, worryingly, still visible today.
Yeah, his warning feels incredibly current, doesn't it? That this fusion isn't fading away, it's just changing its tactics, its appearance. It really demands our attention.
So here's something for you, our listener, to consider. What is the real cost when dogma pushes out inquiry? When obedience is valued over autonomy? And maybe more importantly, how do we strengthen our societies against that pull towards absolute certainty, whether it calls itself religious or secular?
That's the challenge Hitchens leaves us with, I think. How to navigate that complexity and defend the space for reason and freedom.
Hey there, you arrived to the end of this episode. You can always check out my YouTube channel and also keep watching because there are 7 episodes. So you just if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you are going to enjoy the next one. I always like to remember that you can support my work by buying my books. Even though I still don't have a book about religion, which is the main topic of the podcast, I do have a book about artificial intelligence, and also I have a blog called Scientists Free from Religion on Medium, and there are several blog posts there, and you can enjoy it, you can read it, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can share it with your friends. So hopefully I can hear from you and hope you had an amazing time. So hope to see you in the next episode.